Okay, folks, today I had the pleasure to talk to Harald Grosskopf. You might not know him, but everybody is into synthesis and got this heritage things knows Harald Grosskopf. He was member of Ashra and he worked with nearly everybody in the scene of especially analog synthesis, but he's reinventing himself and his music today without losing this heritage, working with the guy who founded Krautwerk today. And he's a very nice and gentle guy. I really had fun. In the second video you're going to see how he's working. And there are lots of information about how he did this album, The Synthesist. 1980 it was out. And so here's two German guys trying to speak English. And we hope we get it through to you that the flame is still alive and these guys are still around. So here's Harald Grosskopf, and Google him. I will put in some links and see what he really did. He's one of the giants, and I hope you're going to have a lot of fun like I did. Yes, we're going to start, Harald. Do you remember that here?
Of course.
I made it by ear, and the question is, how did you do that those days? I tried to figure it out. I have this Euro rack. We're going to talk about analog again. And I try to figure out, because it's a very complex sound. There are many sounds in there, and it might be interesting for our visitors here to hear about that.
Yeah, in those days, like in the end of the 70s, when I started making my first solo album, there was no MIDI existing. So the problem was how to combine analog sequences, to get them parallel running. And by accident, in the place where I recorded, it was the flat of a friend who had that equipment. I didn't even own anything apart from an 8-track half-inch recorder. And underneath there was somebody who was building analog synthesizers, and he said, I'm going to build you a cable, where you can manage to format one of the 8 tracks, and then vice versa, you can put it into the sequencer, and then you have the possibility to run a second or a third sequence parallel running.
That's what you're hearing on the record. I thought there are many sequences. You have the impression this is one thing, but there are lots of different sequences also in parallel with that, isn't it?
But I was limited to 8 tracks. One track was the formatted single, and on the other track I had a microphone, because I did harmony changes, and I did them, without any idea, just made them wherever I liked. But I had to. The problem was to find them back again when I recorded a second sequence. So what I did was from maybe if it was a C, and then I said, okay, C to F. So I said F2 3 F2 F2 3 4 3 1 bam, and then I made it by hand. The second the recording of the second harmony change. Sequence harmony I made by hand, so I had to listen to what I recorded.
So did you have a click track, or the click track was the sequence itself?
It was
so you knew where it is, and then it was like a live recording. The reel was running, and then you went over to or some. So you started with that lick here, or did you have?
I started with the bass. Most of the time was the bass lick, and then I added mostly 2 or 3 sequences on top.
That's what I'm hearing.
The problem was that the Moog Mini Moog synthesizer was out of tune all the time.
Out of tune.
Yeah, but very drastically. I don't know whether it was just this model I used, or it was. I think it was a general problem in those times.
It's still a problem. You still need a little time. For these analog systems to build up, even for the microbrute here, it takes time.
The thing is, I recorded, the first sequence, and then I found out that the first sequence already was out of tune after 5 minutes. You know?
What the hell?
So I had to do it again and over. And so during 6 weeks, it was really a pain in the ass. You know,
6 weeks for this track.
Yeah, for the basic recordings. You know,
for the whole album.
For the whole album.
6 weeks.
But,
wow.
Yeah, 6 weeks every day. You know, a lot of coffee and other illegal substances.
Yeah. But that's great. When I listen to the record, everybody can listen to it on YouTube. It's illegal, we know, but they can. There's also some sort of spacey polyphonic sound in there. And I asked myself, we're talking about 1980?
1979, 1980.
What did you use? Yamaha or Prof?
No, that was
where do these polyphonic things come from?
A friend of mine had this machine. It was a PS 1300 made by Korg. You know, it was a Korg. You know, and it had, I don't know how many keys, 61, I guess. I'm not sure, 48 or 60. And each note had an own oscillator behind.
PS 1000, PS 3200, I think.
There was a 200 and I had the 3100.
Yeah.
It wasn't even mine. So
that's the thing we all wanted to buy when we had this MS-20
exactly,
and thought, oh, but this one is too expensive, but now it would be nice to have.
Yeah,
it was done with that. That sounds very contemporary.
Yeah, it was very contemporary in those times, you know, and we managed to get one from another friend, you know, half a year ago, and then we managed to sample it note by note, each different sounds, you know, because the filter of that machine is not so really well. Even the Halion sampler, you know, with 69 kilohertz, the filter of that is much better, you know. But you know, to record each single note, you know, it took I don't know 4 days. You know, it was like a meditation, you know, and. So we have this machine now very, very carefully sampled, and it sounds really, really nice.
Yeah, but this sample thing was always a little bit static. And if you have, let's talk about this difference between analog and digital, because many people connotate somebody with like you, like playing with Ashra and doing your own synthesis thing with. This is an analog guy, and there's a renaissance right now, and I always see these wars out there. There's somebody saying digital is better, analog is better. What would you say is the difference, and are you puristic more into analog? What do you think?
As far as I never really owned an own analog machinery.
Now you have. You told me.
Now I have one. You know.
I have a mini mute now.
I just bought one. That was the first one I bought. I always was open to any new developments, you know. So for me, it was a great thing to discover, you know, the possibility to record digitally, because I was used to huge studios in the 70s, and so in the period in the 80s, you know, I couldn't afford to pay studio time or the guy behind the desk, you know. So for me that was a bit frustrating in those times, to not being able to record what I had in mind, you know. And then MIDI by what was it, Atari 1200, I guess it was
1040, the Atari. I still have one around.
1024.
3 of those still. It's still a good machine.
Yeah, it was still but it was just MIDI, you know, and I needed, you know, echoes and all that stuff, and that didn't work. So it was not really such a big pleasure, but it was a beginning, you know. And then suddenly Cubase, you know, started to make it possible to record analog impulses, analog waves, you know. And that's,
you can combine it. Of course, you can use a DAW like this one here, and put in this analog thing. What it was totally out of focus for me, this analog thing. I was working 15 years only digital. And then we know we have this Eurorack thing right now coming. Many youngsters are going into that. Now you got this mini Muke, and you're telling me it's a total different approach for you. I got the feeling there's something that you can't even describe by words doing this. For example, if I have the sequence and I only put something very... You make minimal moves here, and everything changes on a micro basis, and they have this haptical thing, and I got the feeling it's different. It's much more direct, the sound. It's like an instrument, it's not a plug-in, you see. And this one sounds different from the one... So don't you think that analog might be a big theme again?
I guess so, because the difference is that digital always will stay like this, like a mathematical cut into a million pieces, and these steps, they create some sort of sounds, that might disturb us, when you listen to the difference between digital produced sounds and analog sound, because an analog device will never be 100% in tune, and I mean, working with big knobs is different than scrubbing things with the mouse, or this is different. But there are lots of equipment, even VST synths, that are very close. They are very close, and if you stack them together, then you're so close that it's hard to say the difference.
I would also say that there's guys out there who are faking this Berlin School Tangerine Dream stuff from the 70s with plugins. Throw it out as a CD and tell everybody it's done analog, but people don't realize it's done with a plug-in. But as it comes to stage and the working process itself is totally different. You have to know what to patch. Also knowing synthesizers. I got the impression it's much better than throw in a VST there, do a preset, and that's it.
Preset is bores me most of the time. Or I take a preset and then I change it, just to get an idea. But working, for example, with a Minimoog, which you can't use the sound a second time. You never find it again, because every time it's
different.
No preset. Yeah, there's no preset. But then recording it with 96 kilohertz, then you get very, very close to the quality. And in the end, when you manage to master a finished recording, then it should be done via analog equipment too, because then it really softens all these millions of digital steps, and then you can hear the difference,
But for the folks out there, it's crazy that it's the first time that you did not own these synthesizers. You made this wonderful music with. This is crazy, because other people had time and like Tangerine Dream, they owned this modular 55 systems. Could afford it, but new music sounds so great. So you're very capable of getting into that very fast and do it on the place, on the spot, right there. Yes.
Well, the thing is, I was a drummer, I never thought to make a solo record. Somebody said, why don't you make a solo record? You work with Klaus Schulze and Ashra, and why don't you make a solo record drumming? I'm like, no, with synthesizer. I said, I don't own synthesizers. So, and he said, okay, you come to my place, and you give me your 8-track afterwards, and you can use my equipment, which his equipment was quite small, but it was working. That's how I worked my first album out.
And it was 8-track.
It was 8-track.
But okay, Beatles also use 8-track, but
3 tracks in the very beginning. 3 tracks,
Yeah, but to me it sounds nearly unbeatable when I see it on YouTube or listen to it on a headphone. I would never guess that this was 8-track, and a guy did it with synths he didn't even own. That's crazy.
It didn't even know how to work, because I had no idea.
There's hope for us.
Yeah. In the studio, the biggest thing I did, maybe pushing on my drum kit, the bass drum, and pushing faders. That was everything. My knowledge about recording technology was below zero. And even I remember when I was in a big studio, and there was the first time, 71, I guess, there was this Minimoog, And from my understanding, knobs, are from left to right. So what I did, I closed the attack, to the end, and nothing came out of it. I said, what the fuck, this machine, I don't want to have anything to do with it,
That's great. So things changed. Today you're very active again. The term Krautrock comes up again. All these things from the 70s, it's sort of cult or our cultural heritage. So you're one of these guys. What are you doing right now? You're working with the guy who founded Krautwerk, I heard.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. And you're doing gigs again, and it's exploding right now. That's great.
Yeah, well, his name is Eberhard Kranemann. He founded with Florian Schneider-Esleben in the late 60s. They founded Kraftwerk, the original founders, together with Klaus Dinger and a guitarist named Hosheng Neyadepur. I think he was from Asia.
Sounds Indian.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not
Or
exactly.
Pakistan.
Anyway, before they started recording, Eberhard split because they didn't make enough money. You know, Eberhard already had family, and he was a bass player, a classical trained. He studied bass, and he studied also painting. So he's a painter and a musician, and he was sick of making classical music, and then he wanted to do with electronic equipment. Jazz rock, you know, or jazz, free jazz, sorry.
Yeah.
And then he contacted Mr. Brotzmann, you know, very famous free jazz musician. I said, no, we're purists, you know, no electronics equipment. And so
far about free.
Yes. So during the years, he made all kinds of very crazy, you know, even paintings. And anyway, and I met him 1.5 years ago. We had on the same place in close to here a little festival, and I remember I wanted to, I didn't know his work with Kraftwerk, so I said I was curious, and then I went into the place where he played, and he made noise, you know. And after 1 minute, I left the room, you know. A lot of people left the room because it was too hard, you know.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Yeah.
Somebody doing noise on stage and not this is eclectic bullshit.
Yeah, and then he must have seen my concert, and because a couple of weeks later he phoned me and said, "Oh, I really liked your performance, and let's do something together." And I was, you know, really skeptic. I said, "Wow, this noise, and how can we do?" And I said, "Okay, why not? It's just around the corner." And then we recorded with video equipment, you know, high sophisticated video. The audio track was okay, you know, and we recorded 2 tracks for 2 sessions, 1.5 hours, and it was nice, you know. Parts were rubbish, but parts were nice. And then I said, "Oh, I'm going to take it into my Ableton equipment," and then I cut nice parts out of it, and then I created stuff. Created new music out of it, and Eberhard really loved it, and I added little sequencer here and there, and suddenly we had a record out, and we found a record company, and so an English guy said, "Why don't you call it Krautwerk?" You know, because it sounds like Krautwerk, and it sounds it's very close, and. So that's a good idea. Could be a good marketing idea, and we named the album Krautwerk. It's out since a couple of weeks, and people like it. We had a couple of gigs in England in clubs, just young people, you know, apart from old fans, but most of the people, I don't know, around 20, 25, and they loved it, you know.
Yeah, I believe that because I listened to it very closely, and I got the impression you have your heritage. I still, because I'm from these days, you know, I remember it's not that smooth. There's interesting breaks in there, but you transport this idea of krautrock of the 70s, let's say, or even the end of the 60s, into contemporary. You still have the vibes of these days, but you also have the feeling this is fresh. It sounds different now. You have different technologies. We're going to see later. You're going to demonstrate. So it's very interesting to see somebody or many of these guys from the 70s reinventing themselves.
Yes. Because we do 2 things, or I do 2 things, you know. I had these times where you constructed with MIDI, you know, but MIDI is like this, and in the end you don't have this livelihood, you know, of music.
There's no flow in there. It's constructing.
Yeah, exactly. Which you get when you improvise and then take the best parts. Like even in the rock bands of the 70s did that, you know. And then they, after they had arranged by cutting tapes, you know, they rehearsed that and then they performed it live, you know. And with the help of Ableton Live, you know, we can do that too with very small equipment. We can travel easy, you know. We don't have, you know, this overwhelming stuff, which is very expensive to get from one place to the other. And
like a DJ today.
yeah, like it's sort
everything
of
on a
DJ.
USB stick. Yeah.
And because of the improvisation, you know, you have these emotional parts, you know, and when you cut these carefully. And I really like the idea because I didn't do that for a while too, and now I have and since I don't know a couple of months we do that over and over.
So you're having fun again.
We're having fun.
And the flame is still burning, and that's great.
I had always fun, apart from the times where I couldn't work, you know, because I didn't have equipment. But,
and you're a great performer also. People should watch you. Yeah, that's what I like about it. You're really to get into this flow, and it's a very physical thing for you. It's not only turning knobs.
No. Music must be physical from my point of view, and I always did it on. You know, I don't know. It happened to me. People say, "Oh, this crazy drummer," because I think maybe it's like the fight against my conscience. You know, you can see in my face. You know, to fight the devils. You know. But yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna stop right now here, and you're gonna build up your equipment here. We have a short look about what you're doing then, and after that, without the video on, we're gonna do a session for ourselves.
Okay.
What a nice guy, folks. Harald Grosskopf here, and later on we're gonna see how he's working today. Doing everything, he did everything. Synthesizers, not even owning them, doing drumming, coming from Krautwerk, and now reinventing them himself with the guy from Krautwerk, former guy from Krautwerk into Krautwerk. If you see them around, or there's gigs somewhere, gonna meet the guys, you're gonna see what we are talking about here. This is really great. Thanks, Harald.
Thank you.
Ja, dann gucken wir noch mal.